Coastline studios, and we want to welcome the Beaufort County Council Chairman, Mr. Stewart Rodman. Good afternoon, sir.
It's great to be with you.
Good to have you, and we're excited because we're starting a new year and great opportunities ahead, and I know that you've recently been appointed to that particular position as chairman, and Paul Somerville is your vice chair, and as such, I imagine you've probably got a string of goals that you've set for yourself as well as for council in the coming year. Tell us a little bit about that. And also, before we do that, actually, why don't you share with our viewers about your past? You've been 12 years on council, 2 years on Beaufort County School Board before that. I'm sure you've learned a lot along the way. Tell us a little bit about it.
It's an interesting story. Back, I guess, 18 years ago, I was a commissioner for Mark Sanford on what was known as the MAP Commission. A couple years later, he recruited me for the school board, and so I served 2 years there, and it was actually a great experience. It's actually very well run, and I got a real in-depth understanding of the financials of education as a result of that. And then Weston Newton moved over from Hilton Head to Bluffton, and so I took his seat on council. And so I've been here 12 years, heavy involvement on the financial side. A little bit in
Which
government.
is your business expertise, right?
Well, I've spent a lot of time in it. I don't know about expertise.
But I'm sure it comes as a handy as far as setting the course for council and in the year ahead. Tell us a little bit about some of your goals that you've set for 2019.
I think the two most important things to me are that we are sensitive to what we need from our people. We have great people. We're under a lot of economic pressure as the economy improves, and so we have to be very sensitive to that. So that's one that we've got to do, because they're going to execute whatever it is that we decide to do. And secondly, we've had 2 or 3 issues in the last 2 or 3 years where council's been a little bit split. Historically, we're always very close together. It's very seldom that we're not almost unanimous on any issue. So one of my goals would be, hopefully, we get back to that
Consensus
point.
building?
Consensus building, yes.
Yeah. That doesn't seem to be unique to Beaufort County Council. It seems to be a universal problem all the way up to the federal level these days, and hopefully you'll have some good luck in your goal.
Well, I actually know that we will. We've got a good group of folks, and so I have high expectations.
What, 3 or 4 new council
Well,
people?
there's 4 new ones and 7 carryovers.
Great, good deal. Well, some of the goals that I know are on your plate are, you mentioned the challenge of the economic development that's taking place. You know, things are looking good as far as the economy goes. What did you mean when you said that this was going to put a burden on the personnel here, the people that carry out the requests of council? Well,
we're actually finding that we're having trouble filling jobs just because the economy is doing well. So we're going to have to address compensation, frankly. That's what it amounts to.
Okay. So do you think that the majority of council would be in favor of raising the baseline for pay here at the county?
I suspect most would join me in my philosophy is that you've got to meet the market.
And you think the taxpayers, the constituents, would be in favor of that?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so.
All right. Well, good. I know whenever you start talking about raising benefits, you've got a large group that's in favor of that, those that are going to be the recipients. And sometimes, as long as it doesn't translate into too high a tax increase, then you should have support from the populace as well.
We will react to whatever the administration recommends. We'll be part of those discussions with them.
Well, now that does bring a point. You did mention that you're having some difficulty filling the positions. One of those, of course, is the county administrator. You're currently being served by Mr. Weaver, who is graciously offered his services for a period of a few months. But how's the search for a permanent replacement coming along?
Well, John is actually doing a super job for us. Great to have him on board with us. The search started, I believe, toward the end of last year. There's a large number of candidates that have filed for the position or that the headhunter firm has actually found, and those are being tiered, and the ones that are the top candidates will come forward to us in the next, I think it's next 2 weeks. Obviously, council members can look at the the other ones and see if there's any that they disagree with the consultant on. But I suspect that we're a couple weeks away from actually seeing a suggested list of candidates for us to choose from, and I understand they're good quality.
How many people will be on that list?
Well, I've heard 71 was the list that applied, which
Wow.
was pleasant.
And so you go through the 71 as counsel?
No, we let the committee, we let the consultant, the headhunter, if you will, sort that down and bring us the top 5, 6,
Top
7.
five.
Yeah.
Okay.
But any council member still has the right to go and look at all 71 if they so desire, because maybe they see something that the consultant didn't see.
What is the council's criteria for the new county administrator? What are some of the things that you want to see in the next administrator?
I think we look for relevant experience is probably the most important thing. In other words, success at other places. And the kinds of candidates that turn up very well would be people who are like deputies in that position, maybe in larger counties, ideally in South Carolina, or maybe some that are in some of the smaller counties in South Carolina where it would be a logical career progression for them to move up to a larger county. Obviously, we take a look at education, references.
And as a matter of fact, Mr. Weaver came from a smaller county and has, as you said, done an excellent job in the last couple of months here. So
yeah. I don't think we'll be successful in talking him into staying.
I understand he's already...
I've kidded him about it.
He's already got sights on retirement, so understandable. One of the things that's big on the plate of council in the year ahead is the economic development. And would you address some of the challenges that you are seeing and some of the goals in that respect?
Okay. We've always had an interest in economic development. The reason being is that we are heavily dependent as a county on a small number of economic drivers. Military in the northern part of the county, and tourism, particularly golf, recreational things in the southern part of the county. If either of those starts to turn south a little bit, then it's a disaster for us. So it makes logical sense to diversify. We put in place about 3 years ago a new Economic Development Corporation, very close collaboration with the mayors as they were putting that together. They've hired a director, John O'Toole, who's got us off and running. We're seeing some good commitments in terms of investment and number of jobs that are coming here. So it is working well. We just need to turn the wick up now and increase that. But we're actually a very good place for businesses to consider when you consider the quality of life that we have here and the financial incentives that we're in a position to provide.
Yeah, I was hosting a mayor roundtable a week or so ago, and one of the things that they addressed in terms of economic development was that many businesses, because the economy is doing as well as it's doing, are looking for places that they can come that are able to readily get them space and are able to readily meet their needs in terms of a workforce. And I'm wondering whether Mr. O'Toole is addressing that at all.
Oh, he definitely is. There's a couple pieces to it. One is, maybe we'll come back to a little bit, is in educating and developing the workforce. Companies really want to see that if they come here and they need 50 jobs, there's 50 people here that are going to be good, strong candidates for them. So that's a piece of it. There's obviously the incentive package because we will be competing against other places.
What are some of the incentives that we can offer?
Typically, they turn out to be in the area of tax abatement. Deferring certain taxes for certain periods of time, or entering into a contract that gets a permanent reduction for some period of time. It's called a tax and fee in lieu approach. So those are the kinds of...
Charleston did with the Boeing Corporation.
Absolutely. It's the same kind of thing, and it happens across the state and across the nation. So we have to compete for the people that want to come here. Then the last one is what you're referring to is what we know is product in their jargon. And there are some folks who, when they're looking for a place, they say, hey, we'd like to be able to be working in 4 months.
Right.
So we either have to have some places built or at least have them at a point that it's permitted, the site is done, the utilities are in place, and then you can, in a very short period of time, build a customized facility for exactly what they need. So those are the two. And I think as we go forward in the next year, 2 years, we'll probably be looking at whether we need to, as a county, as we do capital investments, to fold some major investment, $5–10 million, into our thinking for economic development for those so-called products.
In relation to the first area that you had identified, I know one of the concerns you've expressed is the fact that perhaps county needs to step up a little bit to the plate on higher education here in Beaufort, since South Carolina State maybe is not giving as much as we'd like.
Yeah, the state has not been in a position to provide a great deal of money on both an operating basis and particularly on a capital basis. So that has really fallen to the county and in some cases private contributors. That has worked extremely well, but USCB and TCL both need things. So USCB needs another academic building. They got professors sharing offices at this point in time. And TCL, where they train a lot of people for the jobs that are going to potentially come here, they need a regional training facility. We very recently helped contribute to bringing on stream the Culinary Institute, which is probably in its final design at this point in time, and that'll be a big boon to the economy. But state's not in a position to do it. It kind of falls to the county, and I think we've just got to figure out how to do that, because both of them are important to our quality of life and attracting businesses.
Sure, as you indicated, the county is so reliant on the military, so reliant on the hospitality industry, that if any of those, as you said, ever go south, then we're in a heap of trouble. So when we come back, we'll probably talk a little bit more about some of the other alternatives, and also look at the Hilton Head Airport, which has got some great news.
Okay, great.
All right, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Coastline. Our guest this month is Stewart Rodman. He is the council chairman of the Beaufort County Council, and I'm so grateful to have you here on the set today.
It's my pleasure.
We were talking before the break about some of the worst case scenarios that could occur if we ever saw the military. We've seen years where the BRAC Commission, Base Realignment and Closure Commission, had threatened to really pull out maybe the Naval Hospital or some portions of the air station, and that would be catastrophic, as we've not acknowledged. And of course, the tourism industry is so reliant on how the economy as a whole is doing. So right now, the economy is doing great, firing on all 8 cylinders, but that's always subject to change. Aside from bringing some of the other types of businesses to the Lowcountry, what would you like to see that would ensure stability in the case of a critical crisis type situation?
Well, first of all, it's the economic development that we talked about. I think a second one that's worth talking about is heritage tourism.
What is that?
Well, that's where people come here as tourists, attracted by many of the historical things that we have here. It turns out that we can point to over hundreds of years to many things that were first here. Of course, the Spaniards were here on Parris Island 50 years with 2 settlements and 5 forts, a couple of which were French, 50 years before the Pilgrims. Now, the English prevailed, so U.S. history starts there, but in reality it really started with the Spaniards on Parris Island. And so that has worked out to be a good attraction. There's the Santa Elena, you've probably been there, to the History Center. But if we look at Revolutionary War, we look at the Civil War, we look at Reconstruction, all of those make some sense. There's a lot of activity going on with Mitchellville on Hilton Head. Both the state and the county have put some money up to get that going. Fort Fremont. Mayor Keisling's done a great job in getting us the reconstruction. We got to being a monument, and now that's in Congress. I believe it's cleared the House and needs to go to the Senate. Don't anticipate a problem, but it will actually become a national park with all the benefits that go with that. So if you think about, we got a lot of people that are here as visitors, 3 million a year. So we want to expand the number of things that they have to do so they, one, stay longer, and secondly, come back.
And there's also a distinction to be drawn between the type of person that comes to, say, Hilton Head just to be out on the beach, and the person that's interested in history and has some interest also in perhaps the geographical components of the Low Country.
And the other interesting piece is if you look at the 100-mile corridor from Savannah to Charleston, we're right in the middle of that. 20+ million visitors, and so we want to get some of those folks to take an extra day, come down and spend some time with us. So I think that will be a big economic driver. The other one that I would like to see happen is that we help develop more at Penn Center, and in the Gullah Geechee culture and history. The National Park Service put in place a corridor some years back that extends from Jacksonville, Florida to Jacksonville, North Carolina. We're dead center in the middle of that, and more needs to be done to tell that story. So I'm really hopeful that all of those things will do. And as part of trying to get that done, one of the few things I did in terms of starting to reorganize a little bit, of taking the economic development and the heritage tourism and put them under the executive committee so that we can put a little more focus on it, because that executive committee is made up of the chairs of the standing committees.
Yeah, that was one of the unique things that you had done early on this year, and realigned some of the committees. And for our viewers that may not be aware, what is the distinction between an executive committee, and what are the variety of committees, standing committees, that are part and parcel of?
Well, we have five committees. They're pretty much self-explanatory. One is finance. One is public facilities, roads, and so on. One is a variety of community services. And the last one we call natural resources, which is really the planning. And it's extremely important because we want to grow in an orderly way. We know we're going to grow, particularly south of the Broad, but we got to do it in an orderly fashion. Now, those 5 chairs then form the executive committee, and we have some items that span multiple committees, so it makes sense to do those there. And so for that reason, I moved the executive, the economic development, and the heritage tourism into that, along with the airport.
Which means that would be included as part of the duties of any council person, right?
Yes, and so I'd actually chair that committee.
Is that going to be burdensome? Because you folks really are doing this as an ancillary, many of you, ancillary to your primary jobs. Some of you are retired, but is that going to be too much for some council people to handle well?
Well, they signed up to do it.
Good point. That's true.
Actually, I don't think it will. We have, it's very interesting, we have on the order of 25 to 30 agencies, boards, and commissions that do all kinds of things. Most people don't have a full appreciation with that. We have liaisons to those. We've added a couple of liaisons just so we have a closer contact with every one of those. So I'm going to be looking to individual council members to make sure whatever agency they're dealing with, that they're doing an effective job, because there are eyes, ears, advice to them. And in the case of the committees, they're really the ones that do the vast majority of the work. In fact, when something comes to council, it's pretty much a done deal. Occasionally we have some that require a lot of debate, but a lot of our work takes place at the committee level.
I see.
And I'm not bashful. I don't do any work. I just like to make work for other people.
Well, that's what a good chairperson does, I guess. Back in November, the county voted in an extra penny sales tax, and how are things coming along in terms of spending all of that extra revenue, and what are your plans for it?
Well, it's 4 years, 120 million, and if we get to the 120 before the 4 years, which is most likely, it cuts off at that point in time. 3 projects in there. One is an $80 million contribution toward the replacement of the bridges to Hilton Head. It's a couple-year project. It requires some additional state money, and there's already some federal money that's in the pot because one of the bridges is at the end of its useful life. So that's going to be $250, $300 million to do all of that. So this is a kind of a down payment on that particular piece. There's a lot of growth on Ladies Island, and there's a $30 million plan to upgrade the roads to accommodate that. And then there's $10 million toward what we call pathways and walkways throughout the county, where we either need them for kids going to school or for tourism or whatever it might be. So those are the 3 components, and we were just delighted that it passed, and passed by a nice margin, and there was a lot of people in the community that worked hard to be advocates to make that happen.
Well, it sounded like there was enough reward for both sides of the county to vote it in, and it makes good sense, I guess, to now move on to the new bridges on Hilton Head, because you just completed the expressway there that with the flyover bridge that ties into those bridges. But the concern that I have is, once you replace those bridges, is there a plan, or have you discussed widening 278 on Hilton Head Island, at least as far as to the Crosstown Expressway?
Yeah, actually the way the project is defined, it runs from Moss Creek, so it captures the flyovers all the way down to the point that the Cross Island starts. So that entire project gets looked at. The first step is what's called an environmental assessment, and that's underway. There's a lot of federal requirements of what you have to do. Now, to get to the environmental assessment, to say that it doesn't have an adverse impact, they essentially have to do all the preliminary design, know what it's going to look like, where it's going to go, and I think that I think we'll see most of that in the next 6 months. They'll have the alternatives start to lay out, and I think about a year and a half from now, we'll have what are the proposed pieces of that. So yes, to your point, it does look at the entire thing. It doesn't just look at the bridges.
The bridges, yeah.
With a road to nowheres.
Right. Yeah, you hate to see the funneling effect take place there. How about Ladies Island? What are some of the areas there? You talked about $10 million. And
well, it's 30 for the Ladies Island.
30, I'm sorry.
And I'm not as close to that as I should be. But it basically, there was a long study done with outside consultants as to what was needed. I think a lot of community input for it, and there isn't any reason that can't get done fairly quickly, because actually both the pathways and the Ladies Island piece, the money for the bridges won't be required till toward the end of the 4-year period, so the money being collected can actually go to those, and so hopefully we'll move fairly quickly on both of those.
They'll move faster, yeah.
Yes.
One of the components that people who live in a community like to see is this, what we call passive parks, and I know you've got some plans for some passive parks, both north and south of the Broad. Share those with us. Yeah,
the county for many years, and some of the municipalities have done what we call a rural and critical, where we buy land and set it aside for good reason to preserve it. A couple years back, we actually changed that mechanism with the approval of the voters to take 20% of the money that was being collected and actually just use it on passive parks that were on the land that was being developed or being purchased. And the thought process is, it's great to preserve it, but some of those things in the course of preserving it, we want to make it open to the citizens so they can use it, whether it's a shelter or a road or whatever. So yes, you will see us do a lot in the passive park area, and I think there's quite a few millions of dollars in the 5 to 10 that's accumulated toward that particular activity.
Goal. Okay.
So that's one that everybody buys into.
Lastly, we've got 2 minutes left. Tell me about what's going on at the airport on Hilton Head.
Well, the airport went through a long process working with the FAA and is mostly funded by the FAA to extend the runway to 5,000 feet. That's the magical number for the FAA and for insurance purposes. It does two things for us. It opens up to all business and private aircraft, which then will contribute greatly to corporate hospitality and to the real estate market, because more people in the more expensive second homes will be able to do that. Secondly, and it's proving to be true, it will open it up for commercial service, and to date the three majors have committed. American is already flying because they were here before, but both Delta and United have recently committed, and between them, 3 airlines and 6 cities. And so it's going well. The next thing we got to do is expand the terminal. So stay tuned for that. All
right, we'll do that. We'll do that. Lots of growth going on in the county. We hope and pray that it's going to stay that way. And
this is a great county.
It is.
And we're blessed to be able to do a lot of things that other counties can't do. And we just have a great quality of life.
All right. Stu Rodman, who is chairman of this year's Beaufort County Council, and we thank you so much for joining us on Coastline. Next month, we're going to be talking about education and scholarships, perhaps some money for your kids. We'll hope you'll join us then. Until then, have a great month.